Good evening and welcome to District Reports. I'm your host, Eve Galanter, and tonight we're going to be talking about the flood of 2018, both the flash flood and its repercussions and different occurrences in the downtown area. It'll be one of those iconic Madison events cited for years by those who were here, those who sandbagged, those whose houses were flooded, those whose businesses were devastated, those whose cars were submerged, by reports of life-saving heroism and outright thievery. Yes, that includes some pumps outside of Monona Terrace that were stolen, really. And lives that were lost in the raging waters. It's too early to know, according to the mayor's office and others, the fiscal extent of this damage and whether uninsured city and individual losses will be compensated by a disaster declaration. It's also being cited by policymakers as a time for action, but not everyone agrees on the short and long-term solutions to reduce flooding and to deal with stormwater management, especially the need to lower Lake Mendota. Some infrastructure proposals were included in the mayor's capital budget even prior to these events, and the county executive has also proposed some infrastructure funding in his budget, but no mention of Lake Mendota. The former county executive, Jonathan Berry, has scolded everybody for not taking action on lowering Lake Mendota. Our two guests today are uniquely qualified and positioned to share both experience and expertise. Alderwoman Ledell Zeller, who represents a downtown area affected by the rain and flood, and Rob Phillips, the city engineer for the past 9 years, whose expertise can help us understand some of the alternatives to prevent this happening in the future. Rob, welcome to District Reports.
Good to be here.
Help us differentiate a bit, as you did just prior to our going on the air, the difference between the two events, the flash flood that occurred in late August and the subsequent issues relating to the lakes.
Sure. So what we have is two separate but related events. On August 20th, we had a very significant storm. This dumped in excess of 10 inches of water on the far west side, and then as you go east toward the isthmus, less and less water, to where you get to the east side, and it was just it was lighter rain far lighter than the west side. So that's one event, is the flash flooding, which caused a lot of the things that you talked about, the flooded cars, the damaged businesses and homes, and these types of things. The event that quickly followed that, is a lake level event, where Lake Monona rose to 10 inches over its 100-year flood elevation within a few days. After the event, it was already substantially above the 100-year flood elevation. So we've got two related events that are very different. Again, the damage occurred during the first event, the flash flooding. Some damage due to lake levels, but much less damage than what occurred on August 20th.
Okay. And when all these events were occurring, I'm sure you and your colleagues were all hearing from your constituents. What is it that they were reporting, and how were you and your colleagues sort of keeping track of all of these things? And what were they asking you to do?
They were most interested in information, what they could expect and what they could do. One of the things that they were concerned about was water actually flowing into their homes by the rising water. Particularly along Marsden, we have, and that street was closed for a good portion because of the high water. They were also concerned about the possibility of backing up into their basements.
Sewage.
Yeah, so they were really wanting information. And this is where I have to give kudos to city staff, because truly they did an outstanding job of keeping Alders informed about what was going on, what to expect, the options to address the various situations. That allowed me to get that information out to constituents on a very timely basis, including sometimes more than one email or update alert a day, so we'd have to timestamp those. And I got more positive feedback for the keeping folks current and in the loop about what was going on about this than I had about anything. So people really did appreciate that and were looking for information and help in knowing what they could do to protect their property.
And the media must have been in pretty regular touch with you, and certainly the mayor's office and you, as well as the Alders. I mean, issues like East Washington and East Johnson and Willie Street and all the streets that were not passable, and recommending detours. How did that come about, and how were you able to continuously update them?
Well, starting on the night of August 20th, we had an emergency operations center activated, and pretty much from that day for a few weeks, we had that running during the day and had staff available at night as necessary to do the various things that you're referring to. So we had our protocols for dealing with the closure of roads and these types of things. What we were able to do through the help of numerous city agencies is provide really real-time information about when the closures were taking place. So if that was in the evening or in the middle of the night, we were able to provide that information to the public as roads were being closed. And with water sitting on East Washington Avenue and on Johnson Street, and Johnson Street eventually closed, it was very obvious to everybody that something significant was going on.
And what kinds of solutions did you, or even interim, remedies, did you think about, discard, and perhaps choose some alternative way of assisting in keeping traffic flowing to the extent we could? People were trying to get to work, alternative means of getting around Lake Monona, people lifting their bicycles over the orange cones, to use the capital city bike path. What kinds of things did you implement and then have to look at alternatives?
Sure. Well, there's quite a few things we looked at. The main thing, again, is just information, providing information so the public knows what roads are closed, and that they should allow more time to get to work and that type of thing. So that was done, and then signal timing was adjusted by our traffic engineering department as necessary to make things flow. In some instances, parking was removed. Parking was removed from Willie Street. We were very concerned about emergency vehicles being able to access the hospitals from the east side. So we're always considering, what would happen if we had to do more closures, if we had to close East Washington Avenue, for instance, completely. So we were very concerned about these things. So we wanted to keep parking off of Williamson Street during the worst of this. Obviously, it's been back on now. But that's another thing that we had done to address the traffic issues.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I would just add to that, Rob mentioned adjusting the traffic light timing, and one of the things that District 2 and 6 have had to cope with is the underpass under East Washington has been closed due to flooding. And this is the way that many school children have used to get back and forth to school. And so having school children cross East Washington is a little bit of a unsettling and scary situation. So staff worked with the neighborhood, the school, me to adjust timing of the crossing lights to help with that. It's still obviously not ideal, but that was very much appreciated by people. And then also we had some crossing help from police and traffic engineering and some other volunteers from the neighborhood to help kids get across. And in the interim, most of the children, or a lot of them, have gotten alternative ways to get to school other than crossing East Washington, although there's still some that are needing to do that to get back and forth to school.
Robert, you and your colleagues must have been anticipating, based on the age of some of our stormwater management infrastructure, not this particular flood or this particular set of instances, but the mayor's budget, capital budget, proposes some significant funding for some infrastructure dealing with that. Could you talk a little bit about that? That came even, that his proposal, I think, was released even before the flooding.
Yes, yeah, and the budget that the mayor put forward was produced by staff and even put out, finalized before at least for the mayor's executive budget, finalized before the flood occurred. And we fully expect we'll have to do much more in this area in terms of capital improvement projects that would reduce the likelihood of flooding occurring in the future. Most of those projects are related to the August 20th type of an event, or even smaller events. There are many people that have flooded multiple times, and we certainly would make that a top priority. So right now we're looking at how we can prioritize all the various needs that we know about there. It's a big chore because there's hundreds of them, and then from that prioritized list, begin to fund those projects, which means designing, public involvement, and ultimately construction. So we fully expect that we're going to have to work on the budget more over the next couple of months as it's going through council for final adoption.
So what can you summarize or explain to our viewers what kinds of things were anticipated even before these events that you were going to be doing, whether it had to do, as I recall, watching some of the finance committee hearings about McKenna Boulevard and that section of the city and others. What exactly, with the millions of dollars that were proposed in the executive budget, what were you planning to do? What that may need to be supplemented?
Right. So we were planning a project on McKenna Boulevard at Alder Park to get more capacity under McKenna Boulevard to reduce flooding in that area. And there was an area in Hawks Landing that we're working on as well.
When you say more capacity, we just need bigger or better in pipes
Bigger
and
pipes,
sewers?
bigger pipes.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's not quite as simple as that in a lot of instances, because we have to be very conscious of the downstream impacts that we're creating when we just increase the capacity in one place. It may increase flooding downstream. So that's something that we have to be very careful of as we look at solutions, not to solve one problem, but create another problem somewhere else is a real legitimate issue that we have to address.
And with regard to Lake Mendota, what recommendations are you and your staff making, or to the mayor or to others, about what should be done there in the future?
Well, perhaps I could explain a little bit how the system,
The
how the water
whole
flows
lakes.
through
Yeah.
through Madison. So it comes in on the north side of from the Yahara River into Lake Mendota on the north side, and then there's a dam at Tenney Park, which is discharges into the Yahara River to Lake Monona, and it flows out of Lake Monona through the Yahara River again. So Lake Mendota has a dam where there's good control, so water can be released at various rates very easily. Lake Monona is not, there's little that can be done in a flooding situation to get more water out of Lake Monona. The county has done an excellent job managing the lake levels and cutting weeds on the channel in the Yahara River out of Lake Monona. But the point I want to make is Lake Mendota can be controlled to some extent, to a large extent actually, and Lake Monona not so much. So as you look at solutions for this lake flooding problem, again, this is the second flooding event that we're talking about, the lake flooding problem. As you look at solutions, you look at either getting more water out of Lake Monona or perhaps dropping the lake levels so that the water can come up from those rain events without coming up as high, if that makes sense.
And that's
What
certainly.
and that's the controversy, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is it that you and your colleagues have been hearing from folks who have property on Lake Mendota with regard to lowering it?
I've been hearing more from people who have property that is prone to flood because of the situation that we've experienced. So I've heard from a lot of people saying, why do we keep the lake level this high? If we lowered it to the low end of the range, this could have been, according to them, avoided. And I think it's an excellent question. Why was it so high? Well, it is a county decision, and I can't say that I really have an answer for that. I question it myself, why it was so high at the time of that rain event. Now, I do understand that there is some difficulty in getting the water out of Monona because of the weeds and some of the blockages at the railroad crossing bridges. So there is that issue. And to lower Mendota, what is it? If we lower Mendota 1 inch, it raises Monona 5 inches. So there's a lot to think about and balance.
I would say, first of all, that Dane County does manage the lake levels. They're doing an excellent job with that. It's as much as they want to lower the lakes quickly, there just are constraints in the channels, the Yahara River, that just doesn't allow them to do that. So
Does it have to be done in such close proximity to an event? Can it not be that way on a regular basis?
Sure. Well, the county works under operating orders from the DNR. Okay, so they tell the county where to keep the lake levels. The problem is with our wetter and wetter weather, larger rains that we're having, and wetter summers and whatnot. They're very often above the summer maximum level set by the DNR. It's not that they don't want to be at the summer maximum level or below the summer maximum level. It's just they can't get it there.
So what is it we need from the DNR? What message needs to come from the city and the county to the DNR? Is it, hey, give us the ability to make these decisions, or how do we address that?
Well, one of the things that has been being advocated for, and I think this is where the mayor's coming from, is to get the Lake Mendota to that low that we're legally allowed, that the county is legally allowed to target. And then have experts really take a look at what more do we or should we do and how would we get there. Because as Rob said, circumstances have changed. I mean, the lake level is, what, 5 feet higher than its natural level from the mid-1800s. So, I mean, it is a very different system now than what it was naturally back in the mid-1800s. So, yeah.
So you're saying, if I just want to make sure I understand, that currently the DNR does give flexibility to the county
Well, if I
with
could,
regard to the lake level?
if I could explain, the DNR sets a summer minimum elevation and a summer maximum elevation. And the folks controlling the lakes are to maintain a level between those. But again, it isn't always possible. If it rains more water comes than they can get out, then that's a problem.
And that's a situation at the time when this big rain event came, that it was already a foot above the maximum.
That's correct.
Okay.
Foot above the maximum. So had it been at the minimum, you know,
Or closer
to the minimum, the impact.
If it were possible to just operate within that range, yes, we would have been in much better shape for this event.
This obviously calls for a fair amount of city-county cooperation. And there has been, you know, in the past, well, there is still, I think, a city-county liaison committee among council members and county board members. Is this an issue are you aware whether this is an issue that is going to be at the top of the agenda for that group?
Well, both the county exec and the mayor are interested in forming a group of experts to review the recommendations of the last group that got together to discuss lake levels.
How long ago did the last?
That was around 2010. Yeah. Yep.
And what was their recommendation at the time? Do you recall?
Well, the group looked at a lot of recommendations, and a recommendation, the lower lake levels, was not included, but there are a number of other recommendations that were included having to do with longer-term strategies, such as, you know, promoting more infiltration in the basin, to shorter-term strategies like mowing, more weed cutting and that type of thing. So, but there is quite a number of recommendations and quite a bit of information. So it's probably
Were many of those implemented?
some of them were, but many of them, others still need to be implemented. So, yeah, there's definitely more to do there.
What do you see as next steps? So is it pressure from constituents? Are people concerned about another study committee?
Yes.
And
Well, I
what
mean, I
action,
think,
what will happen?
Yeah, I think a number of people are concerned about a study committee that doesn't, go somewhere. As I think the mayor's concerned about that. And to do what we can do now, then get the experts together rather than perhaps vested interests.
Have you been contacted recently or by members of the city council who are looking for to make capital budget amendments, asking for your expertise in how to craft that and what it would be best focused on?
We definitely have council members very interested in making improvements in our stormwater system. They have been understanding of our situation right now, which is that we're collecting information from the public. Right now, we're getting those locations, documenting them, and then from there we have to prioritize them, and we're working on policy because we really lack policy to address this on such a wide spread scale. So it's very much a citywide issue.
So you're crafting policy in part based on those recommendations from 8 or 9 years ago.
No, I'm sorry, we're confusing two things. So the recommendations from 8 or 9 years ago have to do with lake levels in particular. Okay. So that's one issue. The capital budget items for the city of Madison would be addressing flash flooding issues and not so much the lake level issues. The lake level issue we'll work diligently at with the county and the DNR ultimately. But for the city of Madison, it's up to us to solve these drainage problems that have become obvious over the last 2 or 3 years.
Right. The people who are regularly assaulted by floods in their homes, their businesses.
Exactly.
I've heard the plaintive cries for relief, and
There are people that have been flooded multiple times.
yeah.
And rightfully so. They're very upset about that, and that's going to be our priority, is to help people that have flooded multiple times. My fear is it's going to take many, many years to get all the projects done that we'd like to do.
Okay. And you've got a list. Your list has some priorities there then?
Right now we are collecting information,
Okay.
and from that point we will prioritize the projects. Yep.
And you expect from your colleagues that they'll obviously be supportive of this, but there will be a little jockeying for who comes first?
Well, I think that there's a lot of interest in addressing these issues. And we'll be looking to the experts in terms of what the priorities really are.
Right. You know, speaking of priorities, on tonight's Common Council agenda, there is an item that has come before the council previously, and we're having a repeat performance. This has to do with the Forest Hill Cemetery Civil War Monument. It had previously been addressed by the council. It went to the Landmarks Commission, and where the Landmarks Commission decision, I believe it was a 3-2 vote, not to move the monument. That decision is going to be appealed tonight. I won't ask you to predict how the council will vote on that, but do you think it is likely that a large number of people will come to speak to this issue tonight?
We've gotten quite a bit of correspondence about it over the months that this has been going around. So I don't know how it will come out, but there could be quite a few people that might show up to talk to us about that.
Well, I want to thank you both, Rob Phillips, our city engineer, Ledell Zellers, the 2nd District Alderwoman, and to our viewers, if you have an opinion about the Forest Hill Cemetery Monument and whether or not it should be moved or removed, stay tuned to tonight's Common Council meeting immediately following district reports, and then tune in again next time for issues to be discussed on district reports. Thank you. And thank you.